Hello everybody and welcome to this edition of Ed Puzzle Notes. Today we're going to go over briefly the dermis in your skin and also the sensory receptors. Now remember, of course, the dermis is located just below or deep of the epidermis. It is made of connective tissue composed of collagen and elastic fibers. Fibroblasts, those are cells that make the different types of fibers. Macrophages are immune cells, and also adipose or fat cells. This region contains the hair follicles, so the hair follicle does extend down into the dermis. It contains a bunch of different types of glands, like this one right here. That is a sweat gland or a sudoriferous gland. Since it's not emptying its contents into a hair pore, that's an eccrine sweat gland. This right here would be an apocrine sweat gland because you can see it's emptying its contents right there where the pore of where the hair comes through the epidermis. It also, of course, contains these glands that secrete oil. Remember, those are called sebaceous glands. And it also contains a bunch of nerves, both sensory and some motor nerves. And it contains the blood vessels, arteries, and veins, which help to nourish both the dermis and the epidermis, which lies superficial to the dermis. Now there are two major regions of the dermis. You got the papillary region, that is the most superficial region. It's about the top 20% of the dermis. And then you have the reticular region, which is located below or otherwise called deep. So the reticular region is located deep of the papillary region. And the reticular region makes up about 80% of your dermis. And here's the top part, or the most superficial region of the dermis, the papillary region. It's the top 20% of the dermis. It is made of loose connective tissue and elastic fibers. Remember, there are finger-like projections which extend up into the dermis, into the epidermis like that. Those are called the dermal papillae. And remember, that is what gives you your fingerprints and also the prints that are on your feet. The major functions: it anchors the epidermis to the dermis. And it also contains the capillaries, those small blood vessels, which helps to feed the cells in your epidermis. It also contains sensory receptors like Meissner's Corpuscles, which are important for the sense of touch, and also free nerve endings, which are responsible for a lot of things like pain, temperature, tickle, itch, etc. And right here it says that the dermal papillae are not really to allow for gripping. Those little finger-like projections up into the epidermis, they help to increase surface area, because if you're going a wave-like motion like that, you get more surface area. Therefore, you can get more nourishment or nutrients into the epidermis. And also that wave-like motion helps to increase the friction or to increase the adhesion between the epidermis, more superficial, and the dermis below. Basically, it helps to stick them together. And the deeper or lower region is called the reticular region of the dermis. Remember, that's the lower 80%, so that makes up most of the dermis. It's made up of dense, irregular connective tissue. It also contains interlacing collagen and elastic fibers. Don't think you're going to need to know that, to be honest with you. It is packed with oil glands. Remember, those are called sebaceous glands. It is also packed with sweat gland ducts. Remember, those are called sudoriferous glands. You have two different types, apocrine or eccrine. It's also made of adipose tissue, which is basically fat. And it also contains your hair follicles. The function: it provides strength and basically elasticity to your skin, which it gives it its strength, and it also makes it kind of stretchy so it doesn't tear. And here's a little picture of the dermis, the dermal papillae, and the epidermis above. Remember, everything above this, superficial to that, would be the stratum corneum. And here This region here would be the stratum lucidum. This dark region here, you can see all the little granules. That's stratum granulosum. In here, this would be stratum spinosum. Stratum basal would be the very most deep layer of the epidermis. And remember, these finger-like projections are the dermal papillae. Alright, so here are some of the sensory receptors that originate in the dermis. Some of them actually extend into the more deep regions of the epidermis. The first one over here, and I'm not going to write it, but this one right over here is the free nerve endings. Free nerve endings. Now you can see these free nerve endings actually do extend into the deeper part of the epidermis. Now these things are responsible for a lot of things. Touch, pain, heat, cold, and itch. So those are the free nerve endings. The next one you can see right here. Not the best thing. Okay, there we go. Merkel discs. Merkel discs. Merkel. M-E-R-K-E-L. Now these extend to the most superficial regions of the dermis, but don't quite reach into the epidermis, and they're responsible for light pressure. The next one that we got right here, this purple one, that's called a Kraus end bulb. Sometimes called a Kraus Corpuscle. Now these guys are responsible, they're stimulated by different stimuli. They respond to pressure, but also know, and I'm going to write it in blue, that they're sensitive to cold. Kraus end bulbs are sensitive to cold. Kraus, cold. Kraus, cold. And the next one you can see right here. This is called the root hair plexus. Now these are very sensitive mechanoreceptors, and what they feel, what they detect, is when your hair gets disturbed. So if a little bug was crawling on your skin and it disturbed one of the hair follicles, the root hair plexus would feel that, and that's what it would allow you to feel if something is disturbing the hairs on your body. And going clockwise, the next one would be right here, and that's what's called a Ruffini. I-N-I ending. Now it's got a couple different, it also detects pressure, but also know that it detects heat. The way I remember that, if you make a roast, if you are roasting, that means you are hot, that is heat. So Ruffini, it detects pressure, but it also detects heat. And moving along, here is the next one. It's located fairly deep within the dermis, and that's called a Pacinian Corpuscle. Now, Pacinian Corpuscles are sensitive to pressure and also high frequency vibration. And you can look, it kind of looks like an oval, and it's got the little layers kind of like an onion. So that's how you can tell what it is. And they're also located pretty deep within the dermis. And the last ones are right here, very superficial in the dermis. They're actually reaching into these projections, the dermal papillae, and those are called Meissner Corpuscles. And these are also stimulated by pressure and by touch. And here's a little illustration of what I just went over. I just see one mistake. I don't know why this is here, but it says Pacinian Corpuscles detect heat. That is wrong. We're going to put the heat and put it down here with the Ruffini endings. And we're going to put the pressure and move that up here to the Pacinian Corpuscles. And then here's the Meissner's Corpuscles, touch. They also detect very low frequency vibrations. Remember, the Pacinian Corpuscles detect high frequency vibrations. And a couple more things just for fun. Here is a sweat gland called a sudoriferous gland. That's an eccrine sweat gland because it's dumping its contents directly onto the skin, not through where the hair shaft emerges from the skin. Here is a sebaceous gland, otherwise an oil gland. Remember, this is the erector pili. That is what makes your hair become erect if you're cold or frightened. And here's your last slide. You can take these down in your notes if you want. Now you can see here the Meissner's Corpuscles. It says that they are quickly deactivated. That's also called rapidly adapting. So basically these Meissner's Corpuscles, they become stimulated when they feel the stimulus the first time and then they shut down. So they don't continue to fire impulses. And that's good. It says here, you feel your clothing once you put it on, but you don't feel your shirt all day. So the Meissner's Corpuscles, they're rapidly adapting. They fire when they feel a new stimulus, but then they stop. Even though the stimulus is still there, they stop. That's what's called rapidly adapting. And here's your Kraus Corpuscles. Remember Kraus, cold. Ruffini, it's like roast. When you roast, you're hot. Pacinian Corpuscles, those look kind of like a football. That's like an onion. It has the layers, and those are located deep within the dermis. Root hair plexus, remember that surrounds the hair follicle, and that senses whenever your hair gets disturbed by a bug or wind or whatever. And then your free nerve endings, which reach into the epidermis, and those in response to pain, but also differences in temperature like cold, heat, and also things like itch. All right, thank you for listening. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll talk to you next time.